Hi, my name is Nancy Raginara, and I'm here wearing a few hats, one of which is president of the Planning Commission. And I see on the agenda that there will be a discussion on creating a part-time code enforcement officer position, and I'd like to highly recommend that go through. As you all know, we will be presenting a tremendously long, almost 90-page document that will be updating our zoning ordinance, and it includes many, many, many changes, many opportunities for enforcement that will require a lot more hours than what we currently have in our position with one sole person. So even as it is right now, I know that office is stressed and has a lot of things on their plate. So moving forward, I would like to recommend that we do this. Otherwise, we will have this great document and we won't have the ability to enforce many aspects of it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here for public comment?
Hello, Marilyn Kwanzaa, 160 Guy Street. I'm here just to discuss the part-time humane officer position, and not sure exactly, since I'm not up to par of what you guys are working on with that, but I am not in agreement at this point of hiring a part-time humane officer. I realize the county, as you all well know, takes care of that matter. If there's an issue around that, I would prefer to see us work it out with the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here for public comment? Okay, we'll move down to consent calendar. Minutes proposed for the meeting of June 10th, 2021.
Motion to accept.
Hearing no objection, those minutes will be accepted. Okay, we're down to old business, part-time humane officer. So I'll just give a summary of sort of where we are on that. The mayor, Jessica, Mark Scott, Charlie Ramsey, the current dog or humane officer, and Tina Vile and Kelly Schneeberger, I think's her last name.
I'm not sure.
Okay, we all met, and myself, we met at a just sort of an informal meeting to sort of see what the county was, because I think that where the county was at, because I think the humane officer contacted the mayor initially about seeing how the city could help him because he's overwhelmed with respect to calls within the city of Elkins. So my take on that is that the humane officer would like the city to assist with calls within the city of Elkins, particularly on off-duty hours. I think he goes off-duty at 2 p.m., comes on duty at like 6, goes off-duty at 2, and would like to have a city employee basically fill in that role when he's off-duty. And I think there's some conflicting thoughts with respect to the Humane Society or the Randolph County Humane Society, because they have a contracted employee that also fills in or does work when Charlie was off duty, and they didn't really seem to think that there was a problem in I guess fulfilling that role when he's off duty. So, and I think the county does have a part-time officer that assists Charlie from time to time. So we talked about all those things, just sort of really got information with respect to where the county was on that. I think we had some discussions amongst ourselves once the meeting was over. I know the mayor was going to talk with Travis sort of about thoughts and current officers' ability, or a few officers' ability to assist in that role. So I'm not sure if that's happened, but I mean, we're really just sort of filling you in on where we are with respect to that. So if you guys want to add something.
I have not had a chance to talk to Travis about this yet. The gist of the meeting seemed like they were the county's actually looking to hire a part-time employee. So afterwards we had the conversation, there's not really need for us to maybe hire a part-time employee, but if there's times that they need a search warrant or something, the officers can step up and help them with that's what their concern was. Or if there's lifting a large animal or maybe snaring one, that they can offer assistance on occasion. It would be rare when Charlie is not on duty. So that's the gist of the conversation we'll have to have.
Yeah, and it seemed like the county, especially the Humane Society, was advocating for, I guess, the deputies had an officer, Mike Dyer. He was anointed or appointed as like a humane officer, and they thought that would be helpful if the city would have an officer sort of known as a humane officer that could assist in dog cases. Thought there was some benefit to that, and I guess Charlie doesn't really have the authority to do anything besides snare dogs. Can't write any sort of code violations or anything, and have that officer sort of do all the legwork, get the warrants, and then Charlie gets the dog essentially. So that was basically the discussion, and wanting to know if the city how it fit in with that. So maybe once. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, Travis, or something you're prepared to talk about now, or
I would have to carefully consider that before giving my position on it. Looking at manpower issues, exactly what would be involved for the officer that would be assigned that and everything. If you could give me a little bit of time to review some of that stuff and think
Sure.
on it, and then I'll
Well,
let you know my
Travis,
stance.
one thing that I've requested is numbers so that we can kind of get a overview of how many cases we're typically looking at per month, so that you would know how many times an individual will get called out when Charlie's off duty. So we've asked for those numbers. We've also asked for our attorney to review the MOU that the county currently has with the Humane Society, and we may enter into one similar to that, so that everybody's roles and responsibilities will be identified and kind of mapped out, so we know what the expectations are going forward.
I guess, that'd be pretty important to know, because the first thing that comes to my mind is I wouldn't really want a guy who was on duty dealing with those kind of issues, and especially if we assigned, one or two people to fill that role, and if they were on duty trying to deal with whatever the situation was, and then also trying to deal with that, it's going to be kind of a lot to handle. So if it was always an off-duty person handling the dog responsibilities, none of our guys are working less than, we have built-in overtime that happens already. So at that point, when you're calling somebody out, now you're paying them time and a half of what the regular wages are to work as a dog warden. Is that cost-effective compared to paying a part-time? I think there's a lot to look at there before making a decision.
Sure. I think there was also discussion about the current county ordinance that excludes the city of Elkins from enforcement by the county. So we talked about that with Mark Scott, and he seemed to indicate that that wouldn't be a problem to get that amended, but not sure. Not sure how easy that would be, and really any workable solution that ordinance would have to be amended to include the city, and that was sort of the discussion with respect to that. Okay, I guess we'll just place it back on the agenda, maybe have some more consideration about it, and we'll circle back around and see where we stand. Mark did confirm, I think maybe we knew this, but that the county's budget for the humane officer position is about $80,000 for equipment, training, salary, all that stuff, benefits. So we'll just mark that item on the agenda and circle back around after some more consideration. So now
Counselor, can I just add
Sure.
one other thing?
Please.
I think you mentioned everything that was on my list, but I had one other, and that was just talking with our city attorney about, is there a way that Charlie could be granted additional authorities? And maybe that's becomes unnecessary if there's an assigned humane officer, but to enforce city ordinances that, don't apply in the county otherwise, like if that's a possibility.
If we had a specific animal ordinance.
We have a tethering law
Right.
that doesn't exist in the county, was the one that I think they have the most concern about.
And how about the barking dog one too?
Yeah.
Don't we have that one?
We do.
I don't think
yeah.
we changed that one, did we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you could, you probably have to pass an ordinance sort of like specially deputizing him or
Okay.
in some manner giving him the authority to act when he's within the city limits to enforce, and we'd have to be kind of broad about in case something came along down the road, animal control type ordinances. I think you could do that.
Yeah.
As long as council passed an ordinance giving him that authority and there wasn't any problem with him being a the county didn't have a problem because he's actually their employee, if they wouldn't have any problem with it. But did I understand you to say, Rob, that the countywide ordinance, that there seemed to be a willingness to address, amend something about that? Because right now, that's the problem. I mean, that is a big problem.
Yeah, Mark, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think his thought was that that wouldn't be an issue in changing that. That was
Yeah,
my
so, I
understanding.
mean, if you all get to the place to make a decision about what to do, I think we can do what Jessica's talking about, and as long as, I think the first step would be a commitment or something with regard to their ordinance that really kind of doesn't allow him to do the things that we need him to do within the city limits currently.
Which he does enforce in the city limits, I guess. I mean, he currently does answer calls and
Right.
takes care of things within the city limits, so I'm not sure it would be much different.
I'm not sure what the reasoning was behind that originally, and it's been around a while. I forget. Do you remember, Jessica, when it was? It was quite a while ago. I mean, obviously, there was some reason that they passed it, but I don't know if it had become a problematic situation because there were so many in the city calls and there were out, county calls. I don't know. I'm just curious as to, we are part of the county, why you'd have an ordinance that limits a county humane officer from, anyway,
Yeah.
it's not,
Really,
doesn't
the-
really matter. I just know it's been around for a while.
The purpose of the meeting really was that Mr. Ramsey reached out and said he's overwhelmed with city enforcement and wanted to know if there was a way for the city to help. And we sat down with them really to explore what they were looking for so we could understand what they need and I guess see what we can do. Basically was not committed to anything, not really saying we're going to do anything, just trying to understand the situation a little bit better based on their reaching out to us. So I guess we'll consider that a little bit further.
It was from 1995.
So it's been around quite a while, yeah.
Anything else on that issue? Okay, we'll go down to compensation review. I know I asked Lenny in an email, I asked him in person if he could be here today, and as far as I know, he's not here. He's not planning on calling in, is that?
I have not spoken with him or had
Okay.
any
He
communication from him.
told me he was coming. So I'm not sure what happened. I know this was on the agenda last time, and we sort of pushed it off because he wasn't here, and we needed his input and explanation with a lot of the stuff in the compensation review. So I don't really know what else to do besides push it off again at this point.
Councilman, I think he's going to be here Monday at Monday's meeting, is he not? I thought I had an email where he's going to be here on the 12th.
He mentioned the 12th, and I sent him a response to said, just so
So
you're aware, the personnel meeting is on the 8th. I thought maybe he had been confused about the dates, and I don't know honestly that he responded to that email, but that's been at least a week ago that I advised him of that, to make sure he knew when this meeting was, and the
Okay.
following meeting after this one.
I don't remember. I don't know if I was copied on that email. I don't recall that email, but I guess we'll reach out to him again. I'll reach out to him again. Could you make sure you reach out to him again and make sure? I guess, and that's another issue I'm going to have to bring up. We're going to have to reschedule the August meeting, but
Okay.
once we figure out what that date is, then we can reach out to him and let him know that he needs to be here. Okay. Old business C, review of personnel manual section 4.F, temporary employees. I know we looked at this last time. Not sure why it's on here again to review.
Not either.
It was on here because the request was made to, the decision was made that we didn't necessarily need to change anything about the policy, but we wanted to develop a workflow that just kind of said when you hire a temporary employee, this is a checklist of the things that you need to do. And I know there was going to be, I believe, and Tracy can probably speak to this a little bit better, but that Lenny and Wendy have spoken about it, what some of the things are, so.
So basically, my understanding is, and I can, once I get to talk to Lenny to confirm it, everything for a temporary employee is required as a full-time employee, other than the job does not have to be posted. That's the understanding that I get. Have not had a chance to follow up with Lenny about that, but like I said, he and Wendy have talked about it, but, drug test is required, all the forms are required. So that's basically where it stands.
And that makes sense to me because the city's still liable for the employees' actions, even if they're temporary.
Yes.
So, makes sense to me. So what do we need to do? I guess,
Wait on Lenny.
yeah, wait on Lenny and then figure out what we're gonna do.
Do you want it brought back to you for approval to amend the personnel manual?
Yeah.
Or just
I don't
have
think
it-
I don't think it requires an amendment to the manual. This is simply an internal document that we'll use to make sure that we're checking boxes, similar to what Lenny produced for the hiring of a new employee. I mean, we can certainly provide it so you can see it, but it wouldn't require an amendment to the personnel manual.
It's just general information?
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Okay. So anything else on that? Item C of old business from anyone? Okay, we'll go down to item D, part-time temporary code enforcement employee. I know Jessica and I talked about this and trying to figure out what we talked about at the last meeting. I think it was more so concerns about Mr. Eisner's, ability to do everything that he's required to do, as well as a succession plan for him if he's out for a long, extended period of time, or if he decides to retire, something to that effect. And I think we talked with Bob Pingley. He was going to create some sort of, job description of what that position would look like, is my recollection.
So the minutes reflect, and it kind of jogs my memory too, that I was going to provide him a copy of the draft zoning ordinance, which I had, but honestly, it hasn't been that long since I provided that to him. And then he was going to look through that document and see what additional duties might be necessary to fulfill the zoning officer role, which now also falls to our current code enforcement building inspector. And then he was going to look at that and see what that involved. And then I had a note that we would revisit it in July or August. So my guess is that he probably hasn't had a chance to do that yet because he hasn't had the document for very long either. So.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I had a conversation with Mr. Pingley after our last meeting, and he kind of feels we may have some challenges having a part-time employee on. And I said, do you think there's enough work for a full-time employee? And he says, absolutely, he thinks there will be. And part of that focus could be addressing the rental properties. So instead of maybe looking at a part-time employee, we may want to look at a full-time employee. Just my opinion.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I was going to mention, council's going to get a presentation on July 21st, right, Jessica, with regard to the zoning ordinance. I think this will give a real good idea about the breadth of this change and the types of things that someone's going to have to look at down the road, as opposed to what you have currently as a zoning ordinance. Now, obviously, things that exist are where they are, but as things change and whatever, and the challenges with that, I think that will help this committee and obviously the rest of council look at that whole concept of how any one person could be able to enforce that, let alone the other duties that a code enforcement building inspector has. So
Right.
I think that might be helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a lot to get someone certified to be a code enforcement officer. So, I mean, it's not just an easy,
I think you said it takes up to 2 years.
yeah.
Well, you get a 2-year probationary license. What they do is they issue a probationary license, and then you have to meet the requirements over that 2-year period of time to get the other certifications, take the different tests and whatever. But once they're hired and they'll be part of the code enforcement agency, if this is what council eventually does, they get that license. Because I believe Mr. Eisner had a probationary license when he first became full-time, but fortunately, because of his experience, he was a master electrician and several other certifications. He already had those, so he didn't have quite as many of the certifications to test for. But yeah, I think I'm pretty certain unless they've changed it, it's a 2-year. So that person, they get that time to do it.
Okay. So we'll bring that back up in August. Anybody else have anything on that item? We'll go down to new business, employee survey review. Again, I think this is a Lenny we need Lenny for this one, unless, I don't, unless someone else has something.
I can just say that the employee surveys are due by the end of the day tomorrow, and then he'll compile all of that information, and I would assume would present it to you all, or to
Okay.
council, or to somebody.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have seen some of the preliminary results. He's done a fantastic job of lining it up. He has scrubbed the identifiers off of the information so that it is anonymous, which is something I had requested. I would encourage all administrative officers to encourage their employees to use this tool. It's a good way for us to measure what we do well in the city, but where there's also room for improvement. And as a supervisor, like I said, I kind of feel like you're held to a higher standard, and it's a good gauge for maybe for you to develop yourself. So I'm very supportive of this.
Sounds good. Okay. So tomorrow's the deadline to take the survey?
End of today, or end of tomorrow, yes.
End of tomorrow? I guess if all the administrative officers could sort of put out that last push to get that done, that would be great. Anything else on that item? Guess we'll go down to announcements. I will need to reschedule the August meeting. I think it's currently scheduled for August 12th. I'm going to be traveling that day, so I don't know if that's something that we want to
Let me see that calendar.
do now. I meant to bring my calendar, but didn't. So we'll probably wing it, though.
What about the 18th or 19th of August?
The 18th would be the regular municipal properties meeting at 9. And see if there's anything. 19th would be the council meeting that evening. But those are at least the recurring meetings that would be on the calendar.
19th is fine with me. I know that day works.
Be fine with me too.
Is that fine?
So you want to do it at noon on the 19th? That works for everyone?
It's fine.
It's fine.
Okay. Any other announcements?
I don't have anything.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Hearing no objection, we're adjourned.
We'll have some stuff for the next meeting. I'll
Okay.
hang out for the next half an hour.